again. We hope you had a mind-blowing time with the first two episodes of OK Computer. It is some pretty crazy stuff, is it not? Pooja and Neil are the creators, writers, and directors of OK Computer. They're two of the finest minds working in the Indian subcontinent today. They are filmmakers, but they are so much more, as the show is going to make very evident very quickly. I mean, I'm telling you, that's Indo-futurism like this nobody's ever seen before. And before we get right into just discussing everything, I'm sure there is a lot that we have on our minds that we would love to share. I would just like to quickly introduce our cast and crew who are here with us. So to start off, we have Vijay Varma with us. He is a panelist on this call. He is in fact the gruff detective Sergeant Kundu that you must have had the pleasure of seeing. Vijay is one of the finest actors working in India today. He's a rising star. He's pretty much everywhere. His body of work is just growing at a breakneck pace. And if you haven't come across him yet, that's just insane. And it's an inevitability that you will see a lot more of him. So Vijay, it's nice to have you here. We also have Diego with us. Now, Diego is the DOP, the cinematographer of OK Computer, who is the man responsible for making it look so damn beautiful. I mean, say what you will, that show is just cinematic. And Diego is the genius behind that. He paints with light. You know, I heard Neil say that once, and I've just never been able to forget that expression because, my God, that is the truth. So Diego is here too, and just so excited to have him here. Thank you for joining us, Diego. I would
Thank
also
you.
like to quickly introduce the panelists that we have here, just so we all know each other. I'm sure a lot of us already know each other, but just so we're all on the same page, we're going to quickly say hello to Keun, who is an expert in cloud forensics, security and risk management, and a leading authority in cybernomics. We're also going to say hi to Anders, of course, a well-known futurist, transhumanist, author, and many other things that the list is long. We also have Stuart here with us, who's a research fellow at the Future of Humanity Institute, who specializes in existential risk and whose mind I am personally curious to pick about the potential AI threat. I mean, I don't know. I haven't made my mind up about that. Of course, there's Avi Roy here with us, and we would just like to thank Avi once again for helping us out and putting this together. A world-class scientist who has a background in biomedical science, computer science, and who for this past decade has headed the Oxford University Scientific Society. Let's also say hello to Guillermo, the co-founder of the Oxford Artificial Intelligence Society, who is an expert on AI and human behavior. We also have in our midst Tia, who is a leading authority on climate change, sustainable design, a visiting professor at CEPT Ahmedabad, and who might have noticed some interesting architecture used in the show as well. We'll get to that later. We also have David Wood with us, one of the creators of Symbian, a very well-known, respected transhumanist, futurist, augmented reality expert, a singularitarian. We also have Brad Templeton here, a well-known software developer, entrepreneur, science fiction writer. So that's something very exciting to talk about right there. And interestingly, an expert in self-driving cars. So that's going to be a fun conversation to kick off. We also have Clive here with us, who's the head of service design at the Royal College of Art, who is a leading design thinker, has his own design consultancy and over 3 decades of experience. We also have Carlos here, who is a computational chemist and a machine learning expert. And without further ado, I would just like to say hello to everybody else who is with us here, everybody who's just attending, spectating, and we're also glad to have you on board. And we're also glad to just really get this discussion started. So I know there must be a lot of first thoughts, but if I just may, I mean, the episodes that I just saw have really gotten a lot of gears sticking in my brain. And I mean, this is the fundamental, the foundational incident upon which this entire insane chain of events is kicked off on. A self-driving car running over a human pedestrian, an unknown anonymous person, possibly hacked. Just, I mean, I would like to just, start by asking Pooja and Neil, what got you here? And what about this particular inciting incident excited you enough to build this marvelous universe and show around?
The truth is that both Pooja and I are robots, so we wanted to make a show about ourselves. No, but we were looking at the world around us. We were looking at what was the breakthroughs that were happening all over the world. We were desperate to try to communicate, condense, and further sort of amplify those breakthroughs and developments, because we were also worried about what was coming next. We knew that there were already instances of self-driving cars having, of course, unintentionally harmed human beings. But the questions that arose when we started looking at those incidents were related to how the social and legal frameworks, especially in the Indian subcontinent, hadn't yet caught up with the rapidly evolving technology. So that became a central focus for us in writing the show. And of course, what drove us further into the world was the various absurdities and idiosyncrasies that emerged from something like this, from our imagination exceeding our grasp. So that's essentially where the show was born.
I also think that as artists and creators, the job to sort of build new perspectives, build new ways of thought and ways of looking into things sort of fall also on us to sort of translate the ideas. We also do think that throughout this world right now, there is this sort of growing wave of anti-intellectualism and anti-rationalism. So it becomes very imperative to sort of not stop the march of technology, because when the self-driving car accident did happen with Uber, what happens is the public backlash becomes so strong that the technology stops developing because of the fear. But technology really doesn't have a bias, all of you guys obviously know. So we also wanted to show that humans end up coding their biases into technology, and we should be sort of aware that this is any scientific breakthrough has their merits, it has their pros, their cons. What's very important is to have a conversation, is to have a dialogue with everyone, for everyone to be equal sort of participants to this, which is why we thought having it in a story form, having it in a show form would be the best way to do it, which is, I think, how we decided to do OK Computer.
That's really beautifully said, Pooja. Thank you. And it's quite true. I mean, the march of technology is bound to move forward, whether we like it or not, and we might as well get stakeholders involved. Brad, I think the panel here would love to hear your thoughts on this, given your expertise in the subject matter. What do you think of this particular instance and this particular conundrum?
Well, I think that self-driving cars, I mean, they're not any kind of magic AI as they're typically programmed. They're right now, at least, they're just pretty ordinary computer systems. And so there would be, if someone were to alter the code to make it deliberately non-safe, that's something that could certainly happen. There's nothing too remarkable about that. You imagined in your show, of course, a level of AI which is trying to, handle a moral code, the Asimov rules of robotics, which of course are fictional. They're not from anything in real AI or real robotics, but the people have become used to them in fiction, and your work is fiction, of course, so you've applied it there. And Asimov spent most of his time actually writing about these invented conflicts when an AI was trying to evaluate moral decisions, like whether to harm someone. So that's an interesting question, but it wouldn't apply to today's technology.
David, would you have any follow-up thoughts on that?
I may have missed the beginning of this discussion, but I just want to say I found the whole thing very thought-provoking. There are lots of little remarks here and there which show insight into many of the current issues and technologies. Well, one reason we look into the future is to consider the present day as well. And so the throwaway remark, these AIs just want us to argue. I mean, that's quite perceptive, because indeed the social media flourishes when we get more emotional. We put more of our time into it because we get more emotional. So I like that. In terms of the self-driving cars, I mean, I completely agree with Brad. They can already be hacked. Indeed, the Uber incident, it probably would have stopped, but it had been overridden. I believe, as I remember, that it would have jammed on its brakes, but because the cars in testing had jammed on their brakes quite often, they were too prone to go into this emergency mode. That had been disabled, and instead it was relying on the human to take over in such a case. And that's exactly when most of the issues arise with self-driving systems. For example, we've had self-driving airplanes for a long time. Well, it's not quite the same, of course, but they fly themselves most of the time. And the difficulties arise when the airplane suddenly requires humans to pay attention. And there have been airplane crashes, very famous airplane crashes, when the humans weren't able to quickly get up to speed with what they should have done. So anyway, this system of handing over control to the human is where most of the issues have arisen so far. It's like, what's the problem with security? It's usually the humans in the security system that are the issue. And so indeed, I think this is, in its own way, this is reflecting back to us a possibility from the present day and putting it into this very entertaining future situation.
Yes, by the way, if I'd like to see something explored more, it's actually the second law of robotics from Asimov's books, the law that says that robots must obey humans, which is to say that they are slaves, that they are property. And once you start giving the robots more will, as you've done in this series, and their own morals and their own thoughts, having them be at the same time slaves is a very interesting question. Do they react to their slavery? Do they resent their slavery? Do they love their slavery? Do humans? Well, you do have obviously this organization, which we saw just a little bit above, and the leader of the organization at the end of episode 2, which possibly objects to that slavery. And that's something I would love to see more explored, because it's not talked about as much. We either think of AIs as simply property and something to do our bidding, or sometimes we think of it as something that's another being. And you're trying to depict a world where it's trying to be both.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, David and Brad. Very, very compelling and insightful points there. I would actually just like to invite everybody, leave the floor open to just whoever would want to share some thoughts. First impressions, any pressing questions, anything you would like to send Pooja and Neil's way?
I had tremendous fun. I had tremendous fun watching this, because I love seeing technology not work as intended. I think that is one of the most interesting things about futurism. Most of the time, the technology on Star Trek works exactly as it should, and that is very boring. Of course, occasionally it malfunctions, but that's the centerpiece of the entire episode, that the transporter malfunction. In what you have created, you have a much more realistic situation where the things don't work as they should. They malfunction, or they're not used as intended, or even better, they show emergent weird properties, which is of course what both makes for great futurism and great entertainment. Thinking about, so what if we had the robots, how would they misbehave? Oh, they want to be our slaves, but are we going to believe crazy things? Can we trust them if they're starting to joke and playing around with that? So there is tremendous potential here to do not just humor and good entertainment, but also actually good futurism.
Thank you. That's very kind, actually. That's what we try to do also. Like, I mean, Brad, even what you were saying about, the 3 laws, of course, Asimov did spend most of his life to sort of debunk it and have this, that obviously these laws don't work, and you cannot really keep any, I mean, we don't know what consciousness is, we don't know what identity is, so how can you code it and how can you expect them to be slaves? So I think through the show, we also sort of try to do the same thing. We try to sort of debunk the idea that, because it's almost like a PSA for people to feel safe. It doesn't mean anything, but it's also it's a PSA, it's a public service announcement. And also through the show, we try to do this coming of age for every single robot that we have. And it's not the same coming of age, because we imagine all these AIs to have like different levels of I don't know, sentience or like intelligence. So it's a different sort of, it's fantastical. So we try to do that. And yes, we did the mechanical failing thing. I think it's also a very, very Indian thing. We in India, we end up like hitting our technology a lot. We beat up the TV, we beat up the scooter, we beat up the remote. So it's, we Indianized it. So I think we really wanted to bring that sort of quirk into it as well.
I think you did that really, really well, because, I was just sort of sitting there thinking someone is going to slap the computer in a second, right? The collecting of the rubbish. It was like, finally, now I've actually got a role to play. So it felt very much like this technology for technology's sake, rather than actually having this interweaving within the social fabric. It was this urban fabric, social fabric. And the immediate sort of reaction that I had was, give me a break. Like, seriously, Vijay, I think you were talking about something, and it was just like, I just like, I think you called whatever was happening over there Baum Bhaji. And it had me giggling about this kind of like, there were, there was almost like a multiple parallel universe that was happening on the screen with, this hologram lady talking about, please, this is this, crime scene, please step away, sort of thing. And then the chaos of it was the invitation. It was ultimate chaos. Things weren't functioning, didn't quite know what was happening. There was a play between regulation and legislation. There was a play within, who is invited to the scene and who can converse on the topic, who has a place within society to have the technological grasp of working with technology or against technology to get the point across, which is ultimately to find out what the hell happened. And, the first 10 minutes, you're all completely and utterly confused.
That's very true. That's quite well articulated here. And I think it's in the slow making sense of the confusion that unfolds in just getting to kind of get a sense of the world that you're inhabiting, and that these incredible dilemmas are breathing and unfolding in. I think that the show really finds its rhythm. To the effect of something that I think was said before about how Sajan Kundu, the character, was just happy to slap robots around. We, of course, also have the foil to that, Lakshmi Suri, who not only wants robots to be treated well, but is in fact the founder of Peter, People for the Ethical Treatment of Robots. And I'm just curious about, how did you characterize these people and these various viewpoints?
We knew that we were essentially making many arguments. There's certainly a lot of paranoia around artificial intelligence and the sort of rapid invisible march of technology. So while we were writing this, we knew that we had to house individual arguments into our characters. So we knew that Sajan had to be the extremely rational yet paranoid voice, the voice that's deeply concerned about what's happening in the world right now. Lakshmi had to play the foil. Lakshmi had to be the staunch advocate of technology. And similarly, in the future episodes, there are Luddite cult leaders who want wanton destruction of all technological progress. So there were lots of these voices, lots of these arguments in the show, because we wanted to present a wholesome sort of worldview. We didn't want to leave anybody out, because we found often that in these kind of future conversations, we leave out a lot of stakeholders. We wanted to craft equitable, inclusive sort of ideas all built into the show. So even the Luddite cult leader still has rational ideas. His ideas are still coming from a place of empathy and authenticity, and not just a place of gratuitous violence or whimsy. It is an extremely whimsical character, but his worldview is built with rational ideas. So yeah, that's how we started. We wanted to build rational arguments into the show, and that's how the characters were essentially born.
I was just thinking that the episodes that I've seen, I missed half of the second one.
Oh no.
is they're very good at portraying humans and how humans behave and interactions of humans with technology and all those social aspects. But I feel they weren't quite as good at portraying AIs or algorithms. They were basically humans in metal form to a large extent. So they're localized. They have a body. They behave in recognizable human ways and react in recognizably human ways. A bit off, but not too off. So yeah, but I think the focus on human and our interaction with technology is spot on.
Right.
You're quite right with it, because Neil, do you want to? I mean, we did think about the form of AI very often, because like Siri doesn't have a form, right? Siri, of course, isn't a phone. A lot of AI doesn't have a form, but I think we consciously sort of wanted to make tangible pieces of robots and tangible pieces of elements that coexist with us. It was sort of like a narrative and design choice as well. And the other thing we also wanted to do was, which we say through the episode, is that this form has sort of evolved, like to make them cute, to make them, human-like, to anthropomorphize them. It was an intentional thing that designers of robots did, so that they would not get beaten up, so that they would not be violated. So the more you sort of empathize with them as another human, the more like it would be protected, say. So we thought of doing that, and I mean, of course, we would have a lot more like non-form AI or something.
Also, we had to optimize narrative for the purpose of the show. We would have loved to stay extremely authentic and stick to even harder science, but there had to be a certain amount of optimization, just because this was also intended as a conversation starter. It's an icebreaker between us and an audience that possibly hasn't consumed science fiction yet. So we also fancy ourselves as science communicators. So there are certain liberties in optimization that we have to make every day just to ease people into the conversation.
Most of the audience are actually human at the moment.
Yes. Almost all. We're hoping that soon. I don't know, guys.
Yeah, so
there was definitely something that emerged for me, which was about this kind of perfection of AI and rules and the nuance of humanity. And that being, where can we actually walk this straight road of ethics and approvals? And this is the way that it should be, rather than that sort of humanistic, oh, you know what, don't worry about it. Having the delicacy of humanity to differentiate between rules and regulations and a little bit of leeway, I think, is a really fascinating dialogue as well. So what do you allow for, and what can you step aside and notice that humans will allow for? Like, even, rules are there to be broken in so many ways, or we master the rules so that we can kind of, navigate these, talk about taxes. So where is it that we train the machines to know the difference?
Yeah. And also so much of humankind's rules have evolved from our physiological and biological imperatives. So how do you even begin to make a charter for machines who haven't experienced that evolution?
Yeah.
So it was fascinating that Ajib had been fed all kinds of moral principles as part of Ajib's training. And then what was really a good development of the plot is that Ajib changed its, I don't know, his or her, changed its own conception as to what ultimate priorities were, and said, well, the ultimate priority isn't what you fed into me. The ultimate priority, it could be comedy, that this is more important than all these slightly more boring religious moral principles. So that was interesting. And that, I mean, I think there's a real point behind there. I don't think a real AI would reach that conclusion, but it is good for people to think, what priorities would an AI left to its own devices come up with? And it's a bit similar to the film Hair, Joaquin Phoenix Hair, and the AI there ended up with a totally different set of priorities, left humans behind and went off to do goodness knows what else in some multi-dimensional space. So even though we can criticize the AI for not being exactly rigorous from an AI computer science point of view, it is laying down a very important question. Well, what are ultimate priorities, and comedy or something else?
Can I just also
sorry? Go ahead first.
Oh, I just wanted to say, yeah, like well, first of all, I found the show, like the humor, like really funny actually. Like I just was laughing like at so many jokes throughout. So congrats for that. But yeah, I mean, regarding the point that was just been discussed about AI, I mean, I think like it's interesting to compare it with like kind of current AIs which interact with humans a lot. I mean, of course, we know like Siri and Google Assistant, but there's also like lots of like things like Twitter chatbots and all sorts of chatbots in like social media platforms, and those interact with humans a lot. And you see that very often. I mean, for many reasons, like they're more like amplifiers of chaos and the human quirks rather than sort of, you know, this sort of governor that is sort of very equanimous and sort of imposes the law. They very often kind of amplify our quirks and they're kind of just make even more chaos. And I thought that also happens in the show in some ways, like with some of the different kind of AIs throughout. And I think that's quite interesting. And also like, yeah, I want to say like, I think predicting how future AIs will be, it's really hard. So yeah, like, well, I mean, first of all, like whether they're realistic to current AI standards is one question, but really knowing how future AIs will evolve, it's a much harder question. So yeah, I think that's a challenge for like anyone says. It's not unexpected that we will probably be wrong, whatever we predict.
So that's very true. And I think that's probably what keeps a lot of us busy, trying to figure that out.
This was actually driven by the instinct of reorienting science fiction to India, because, and this is an example we use very often while describing what that means in very tangible terms, is that when you drive up to a mall in India, you'll pull up at a bar, and there'll be a machine that's supposed to dispense a ticket to you, so you know where your spot is. But when these machines were installed outside malls in India, they also thought it wise to install people there who would be the mediators between the machine and the driver. So all this person does is stand next to the machine, take out the ticket, and meet the distance between the machine and the driver's outstretched hand. So we experienced this over and over and over growing up in India, and we wanted to sort of encapsulate that experience on film. So that's where the instinct of having extremely visible technology comes from, because it felt like the Indian subcontinent will beat up or manipulate or co-opt very, very sophisticated technology just to suit our needs.
I do recommend you do more of that. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with one of the most successful pieces of Asian science fiction, the Three-Body Problem series from China. And when Western audiences encountered that book, obviously in translation, one of the things that we found most intriguing about it was that it used the Chinese culture and the Cultural Revolution in China as a setting that was alien to Western eyes. And so it made the book get a very realistic sense of the alien. Now, so you can do the same thing with the way life is in Goa and other places. I found it quite just amusing that the first robot we saw was, I guess you'd call it a chaiwala robot, right? And it had a bindi, and it was not at all how I would conceive of a robot that would serve me tea. And so I thought, I thought that was a great little introduction of just how a different culture. Now, for you, as you say, you've grown up with many of these things, but you want to pay attention as you move to Western audiences as to how you can make these things basically give you free, very realistic, alien cultural experience. But of course, it's also real at the same time. So that's something to definitely exploit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think that alone deserves a season 2.
Well, we can only
Sorry,
hope.
I'm just I'm just reading the comments. And as you were talking about, how the public Wi-Fi, there is this AI penguin bot that's so even the weird thing about India is it's this weird juxtaposition because like parts of India we don't even have electricity in some cities, in some towns. So where we do have like incredible technology happening in like some pockets, there's also extreme poverty. So it's like you're living in a different era entirely. So the idea was also to have like these sort of small elements which can sort of go from village to village and still like provide Wi-Fi. And it's also the idea of like upcycling, like these dustbin penguins. We end up seeing it everywhere in our country, and the idea was that was upcycled to make it into a Wi-Fi router. And even with this Moshi bot, the tea serving bot, the idea, Brad, was because almost every Indian has like not every Indian, I'm sorry, I'm generalizing, I'm being insensitive, but like a lot of people have like maids and people have like house helps and offices have janitors and they always serve tea and we call them moshi. So it's also the idea of replacing, sort of not replacing but just having like what would happen if robots sort of start taking those jobs as well.
Avi, I notice you have your hand raised.
Well, I do, and Karen does as well. But I just wanted to quickly say that it's almost 3 o'clock in India. So I'm sitting in Oxford, but I realized that you guys are sitting in India, and not only this was fantastic, but and thank you and welcome to all of my friends and colleagues who are here. But yeah, you guys put together a great show and none of you look tired. You guys look energized to go. So that's absolutely fantastic. And I always judge science fiction, and I mostly read science fiction because I guess I'm a nerd, but so are most of my friends who are in this space. So they're in the team. But I always judge science fiction as a place where it provides a fantastic playground for thought experiments. And in just these 2 episodes and listening to all of my friends and colleagues here, Anders and David and Keun, and I know even the ones who haven't spoken, I can see their faces and the questions that they might be thinking. You have provided an exceptional playground for people to have different thought experiences. And it's really interesting to see the background of David's background or Anders's background or Keun's background. I mean, as soon as Keun started speaking about headless computing unit and omnipresent computing unit, you can tell that she is executive at Google with a software behind. I'm not picking on Keun. She's my very good friend, but it's really interesting that you're giving a playground for all of us to play in, and listening to everybody here in this conversation that is facilitated by you guys and Memesis. Like, this is absolutely fantastic. I'm learning so much about what I watched, and I'm kind of rethinking everything because of all of this stuff. And it's giving me lots of inspiration. Thank you, Guillermo, as well. And this is absolutely fantastic. So I just wanted to congratulate you guys for creating this environment where we can have thought experiments, a playground for thought experiments, and staying up this late and just engaging in discussion with us. This is absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avi. That is incredibly generous of you. And on that note of creating a playground, I would love it to, if we could just hear a little bit from Vijay and Diego. How was the process of creating this playground, of putting together this incredibly unique project?
Well, for me, I guess it was really difficult and different too, because I'm not from India, and from Spain, and I've lived in Canada. So when I first heard about the project, to me, like India, I knew very little about the culture in India. And I remember what brought me in, that was the first conversation I had with Neil and Pooja, comparing the technological worlds difference, and she compared, I think it was you, Pooja, who said that it's as 2001 is to the States to Solaris is to Russia post World War II, and how you wanted to bring like that kind of like how important was that Indian culture to be part of the show. And to me, what drew me was, like, at the end of the day, like I don't want to say I'm not nerdy or anything like that, but like I know very little about technology. I'm definitely not close to any sort of level of most of you here. But what spoke to me was, at the end of the day, is the relationship humans have with what we consider inferior, and like you have all those polarizing positions that you have like on every aspect of life. Like it can be with animals, like you can see a lot of like treatment, like how Vijay will treat animals like robots, like some people treat animals. So like, there was a lot of correlations of humanity that was what kind of like drove me. But you know, we had the idea of like this was kind of like a documentary crew which was following like this kind of like a story, and I guess we ended up stylizing it. But to me, it was an awesome experience in the sense that I've learned a lot about everything, especially about like how things work in India. Like even what you guys were mentioning about the bots and stuff like that, is like it's things that for me coming from another place I could understand, but then you go, you see it, and it's like it just makes a lot of sense. And what you were saying about like how broad I guess the level of advancement there is in India. There's so much discrepancy in between like cities like Bombay and then going to the middle of nowhere, and then you know technology is almost not accessible, and you know that exists. And what I love about it is how you incorporate so much of that now people coming from other places are able to fucking enjoy too, which I think is amazing. I don't know if this answered any of the question in any way, or if this helped in any way, but these are my thoughts.
It helps in many ways, more than you probably know. Thank you for that. Vijay,
I think Diego Tia has a question for you in the chat.
Yeah, if I may ask it, what was your process to articulate these very, very complex issues, but visually? Because the visual inspiration that you've given to us is just as much a diet as it would be the actual verbal conversation that we're having. So, you know, the process that you went about, you know, with this visual identification, yeah.
Well, it's basically like, to me, it's basically like bringing down to its basis. Like at the end of the day, we're all humans trying to figure stuff out, and like identifying the character traits of each character. At the end of the day, that's how you can figure, I guess, how to portray them. Like realistic, I don't know any other way of like, I guess, explaining it. But at the end of the day, the conflicts that they are like, they might be really complicated in a technological level, but at the end of the day, is the same problems we have humans as since the beginning of times, which is how do we keep adapting? How do we keep on like living with things that keep changing around it? How characters like Vijay are afraid of those changes, how characters like Radhikas are more adapting. So I guess it's just whatever it is that we are trying to capture, it comes down to pure humanity, in my opinion.
I'm just going to geek out for a second and go a little bit deeper, and that is that when artists appreciate a form of art, what they do is a heat map over a piece of art to see where the eyes actually follow the screen. And there is now obviously an assessment of that on websites, so you can have a look at where the mouse of a computer trackpad can go and where people are spending more time and understanding it. Pair that with the sort of architectural space that is not designed. So it's the invisible space within the actual screen. And I call that negative space because that's the thing that makes it's like proprioception on screen. It's the relationship of the different items on screen. And to get that visually across to a group of people together with these kinds of conversations, like I feel uncomfortable when there's like so many things happening. And at the same time, you're asking me a really difficult question, which my mind is working on. So, you know, as I think I had a conversation about this earlier, you're having this inner dialogue together with what you know, the future is asymmetrically across India. You've got the future living there and the past living there and the present living there. So it's a really fascinating dynamic of, you know, visually expressing that.
For sure. And I mean, like, that's basically like, I mean, that comes from, again, like, I feel like analyzing what is, and I think we all bring our own personal experiences to anything that we're trying to capture, especially when it comes to art. I might have certain ways to express, for example, claustrophobia. The idea of claustrophobia, the idea for many things might be different from yours and mine. So at the end of the day, just what is we do, or what I do, or what we did together, is we analyze what is it that we are trying to express, what part of the emotional journey our characters are going through, and I bring my own I guess identification of what that means to me, and then I try to visually express it as clearly as I can to the rest. But it becomes really personal at the end of the day, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail, because obviously there's such a difference in how people perceive things, which is part of the conversation really too. And it's again going back down to that, how we analyze and how we interpret anything that comes our way.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
that was
I would
absolutely fascinating.
I would like to add to that. I mean, of course, we don't have the real-time heat maps while we were shooting, but I think as artists, like you end up like getting like this becomes an intuitive process by like you obviously like consume a lot of art, consume a lot of design, you consume a lot of films, so you gravitate that heat map you sort of gravitate to, and it becomes almost instinctual. So I think that plays sort of a heavy part with it. We also sort of try to do visually 2-3 different styles. Like for example, what we wanted to do was whenever we see a corporate or an institution or a system, it would end up being a brutalist building. And again, in Indian culture, when India formed independence, it borrowed heavily from Russia. So a lot of brutalism came to India from Russia, because we ended up copying our constitution also from there. A lot of our constitutional elements came from Russian, the Russian government, the Russian system. So the idea was that we had like a brutalist sort of feeling where we had like cleaner sort of spaces. We had heritage homes, which was this warmer human spaces. So we try to create these visual scapes that could identify what and where the people are coming from, or what the scene had to say. So even like in the first episode, if you see, it starts in this crime scene, which is almost confusing. It's a little like disorienting, and then it slowly becomes more and more structured. So it was this conscious effort to sort of put you in a space that, wait, you don't really know what's happening. There are some things familiar, but there are a lot of things that are completely unfamiliar. And then as we go along, it becomes more and more like streamlined. So I think that's what with Diego, Neil, all of us sort of came together, and Diego obviously like painted those scenes and helped us compose these scenes. Sorry, Diego, I'm speaking for you also, but
no, it's fine.
No,
and I guess like a lot of it comes from that too. It's like you converse and you converse and you converse, and like we spent a month before we go into shooting just conversing and just talking about like just kind of like, especially you find that it's most important when everything goes wrong, and then kind of like I have to be on their brain and they have to be on my brain, and like that relationship at the end of the day just forms by talking and talking and talking.
Yeah.
And same idea is like not only understanding what I was saying before, like how they interpret certain things and how they want to bring them into the screen. Because at the end of the day, it's like I like to say that what I do is try to bring, if there were no words, how can you express what is happening in front of your screen without having to speak, and then just help the narrative. But it's really them. Like they just feed it to me, and like all the inspiration and everything is just fed to me, and you just adapt to that.
On the note of craft, I think it would also be fascinating to pick Vijay's brain. Vijay, what about you? Are you a Sajan in real life? Are you a Lakshmi? Are you figuring it out? How do you even embody an archetype?
I think I'm kind of somewhere in the middle out there. I don't think I'm somebody who completely runs with the technology, because I don't understand most of it. But I'm not averse to it. I remember listening to all this conversation, there is a constant fear of a change or of any kind of change. And I remember I grew up in a household when I was little, my father was very reluctant to buy a fridge, because he probably learned it from somewhere that things kept in the fridge are not good, and they lose their whatever, becomes something and you can't eat them, and it's not as good as it is outside the fridge. And we still don't have a microwave in the household. So unless people are educated about what it is, there is never going to be a real change. And so we will be averse to change. Like right now, the character I'm playing, Sajan, and we chose this. I mean, it was an interesting choice to have a protagonist who is running the show ahead with somebody who's doubting the technology or the AI all along. Like he is the one who's questioning it, and you and the audiences are with him until you come to a place where he comes to know what it is and what it holds, and then he changes his opinion about it, and therefore everybody who's running with him changes their opinion about it. So I felt like it's a good journey that the makers have chosen to sit on a horse which you are more comfortable with, to take on this journey as somebody who would point fingers at a say a robot or a machine, and then by the end of it maybe see it in a different light, in a new light, in a more informed light. So yeah, I think in real life, I don't know. I mean, I'm really excited about a lot of technological advancements, but I'm very scared of the privacy and the algorithms running and deciding so many things for me.
I hear you. We have a wonderful question from Catherine. Neil, I would invite you to answer that. But before you do, Catherine, I have a question for you before we get to your question. You have been involved with Singularity University since its genesis. I'm just curious to know, what are your thoughts about this vision of the AI that we might see in the future?
It's as people were saying earlier, predicting what AI is going to look like and feel like, well, I guess 10 years from now, I mean, it's a little bit like us back in the year 2000 trying to predict what we'd be dealing with now. I mean, it's a lot of it is going to be simply based on the psychology and what we're already used to. So you sort of think it's a very small problem. Just a couple of days ago, lots of people were dealing with their Android phones having really weird crashes and trying to figure out, like, where is the crash coming from? And of course, it's not an AI that you're trying to talk to; it's a corporation that you're trying to talk to. But if you try to talk with any large company, as Charlie Strauss said, a corporation is just a very slow AI. And so what kind of customer service are you able to get, or what kind of customer service are you getting? Does the company assume that they could be wrong or not? All of those sort of things. And so, yeah, when you're thinking about what our AI is going to look like, a lot of it is really going to be based on, well, what do we look like? And how much do we think that we're going to be changed in 10 years or not? So I think half of what AI is going to look like 10 years from now depends on a lot of the assumptions that everybody has about it. So by making this show, we may have changed a little bit in the same way that Star Trek changed a little bit of how we expect UI to be. So self-fulfilling prophecies are a really large part about this. So you guys are in a very important position to nudge us towards friendly or less friendly UI just by existing. But I appreciate it. I like the show. Of course, yeah, there's here and there's places where I was trying to figure out, all right, if I'm not getting it, is it because there's a bunch of tropes in other types of shows that I haven't watched? So now I need to find out, all right, for somebody who wants to get into comedy shows from India, what would be the first one or two to start watching, or are there comedy cop shows? What are the underpinnings that I'm not seeing? On the other hand, what I love about it is it means that 10 years from now, there's going to be even more science fiction for me to watch.
I might actually recommend, I found watching it that I was Googling things that I wasn't familiar with. The name of what's the vegetable curry that you called the victim? Yeah, so I didn't immediately know what that was. So, and the temple that they go to find the robot. This is not something that's known to the Western audiences. You might want to actually in the subtitles just put in like kind of like when they have the things for the hearing impaired where they tell you what's going on. Sort of like, if you're not Indian, we'll just make sure you know the cultural reference here. It's also fun, by the way, to not know and puzzle, but you want to judge, is this going to confuse the audience, or is this going to make them feel, oh, there's deeper mystery here, and pick what you do.
Yeah, it reminds me, if you've read Quantum Thief by Hanu Rayanaimi, which is a murder mystery set 300 years from now on Mars, and it drops you in there, and so you're you have to sink or swim or figuring it out, and that kind of stuff where you're not being given some of the clues that you might otherwise. It's challenging. It's fun to be in that position.
But I will channel Ajib and say you must never explain comedy. He would know this. Any AI that's good at comedy would know this.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what we try to do, because very often in India we obviously consume a lot of Western content. So a lot of Indians know everything about American culture and European culture. Like we know Pop Tarts, we know Illinois, we know everything. But what we sort of miss is our own sort of pop culture. We don't really get to see a lot of pop culture in our own shows, in our own films. So we very consciously wanted to create this pop culture of Indian elements. For example, the robots, some of them, like the drawer robot that Sergeant kicks, it's made up of this very particular brand in India called Godrej. So there are these metal cabinets, and they're found in every single household. So the idea is to use pop cultural elements there. And Catherine, what you were saying about how it's like Star Wars, it was a bit like that, because India's never had a Star Wars. We've not had 2001: A Space Odyssey. So it was also this, like in your question, you asked that how do you talk about science fiction to a largely non-science fiction audience? That's what I think Star Wars did really well when it did come out. That it informed a huge number of people. It informed a huge number of kids who grew up to become scientists, who grew up to to consuming it and believing in this sort of new worldview. That's also something that we really like to imagine ourselves to be. Like we imagine that somewhere there's in the small town there'll be some girl or a guy who just see it and say that this is interesting and this is what I want to do in the future. So we wanted to create those robots. We wanted to create those characters who sort of are these rational sort of emblems and these rational sort of beings that can represent that. And yes, talking about science fiction is very difficult to people. That's why it was also, we made it a little into near science fiction. Like it's not so far into the future. It's slightly realistic, like everything is textured. It's almost like how India is right now, but we just push it a little bit so that it's like this alternate space that just technology that exists, we're pushing it to a slight extreme, so people would be more used to it, and then they would and then we can sort of take the leap like 50-60 years into the future, which again we do not know how it looks. Clearly you guys don't know how it looks, so we're all like we hope that you guys would inform us. We're waiting for your next books and articles, guys.
Yeah, you had that little moment of horror when she said, and pineapples are extinct. I was, oh, that was terrible to hear.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the thing that's happening there with bananas.
It's very believable.
Yeah, it is. And I just read, and as you were talking about, Professor Ramchandra was there. Honestly, if we all had you guys, we would have put all of you guys, because we love, putting like real life scientists and real life like futurists into it, because honestly, like that's what is fun, right? I mean, you guys are the ones who we look up to, because we've read all of you guys, and we've read like what you guys think about the future, what you guys think about technology, and we've tried to sort of condense it the best way we can. So honestly, we've done this because of you guys. It's all your thoughts in it.
Season 3.
Yeah.
It's so exciting that we're actually here together for this. There's a great question in the comments. 20 years from now, what values do you hope the show will have instilled in society? It's addressed to Pooja, but Neil, do you want to take a shot at this one?
Well, we've been talking about this. Our singular biggest hope is that kids and young adults will watch this and want to pursue science very, very seriously.
I said that already.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was away.
I know you can see it.
But yeah, if in 2 decades, if the show still has that value, then that's it. That's more than we could hope for.
I actually have 3 things that I think. Sorry, I'm just taking this question. I think 3 things. Having empathy, like if all our technology has empathy, so it's inclusivity and diversity. I think actually not 3, maybe 2. Redressal, like how to because technology obviously it's so exponential and it comes out so quickly that the fact that there is no redressal process is a concern. So if there's easy redressal, then you go back and you change it. So I think empathy and redressal, if we have that, that should be there to stay for the future.
I hope that materializes, because that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
This is such a bummer to say, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. We only have a few minutes.
Sorry, Ayush, can I just, can everybody, Christopher, guys, I'm sorry, but
exactly.
It
would be great to hear some final thoughts and from,
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I wanted to add, and this is a question that probably won't evoke as deeper conversation as we've had tonight, but watching it, I agree with Guillermo, where random bits just really had me laughing. So I just wanted to ask, what was the sort of comedic inspiration? Because I saw smatterings of different sort of styles in there, which I recognize from British television, really. You had the UK Office in there, you had Monty Python, there's a bit of Hitchhiker's Guide, the randomness. So I was just wondering what inspired the sort of comedy that you see in the show?
That's pretty spot on. It's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was the genesis for our love for science fiction. That's essentially where it all started. There's a fair bit of The Office in there in its form. There's quite a bit of P.G. Wodehouse in there, just working itself in the background. There's the classic American sitcom tropes that we employed very liberally. A lot of 30 Rock really made an impression on us, because 30 Rock was a show that sort of employed a brute force approach to humor and packed in a lot of density. So when sitcom enthusiasts broke down the joke per minute ratio in American sitcoms, they found that 30 Rock had the most number of jokes in any given minute, coming in higher than any other show. So all the inspiration has come in from these kind of shows. Yeah.
But honestly, sorry, Neil is really funny. I mean, he wrote pretty much all the dialogue for the show. He's a talent house of witty lines and just great insights. So he's the force behind the comedy.
He's got the way with the words. The first dialogue that you will hear of this lady police officer is, she says, "Welcome to the accident," and I believe that sets the tone for comedy right away. Just like such a serious setup, and there's a dead body lying, and there's a car, and the officer goes on and says, "You're welcome to the accident," and he has 500 other gems such as that. But personally, I was also looking closely at Buster Keaton's work in terms of being a very man-wronged, a very serious man on pursuit, trying to fix things, try to include some of that kind of a tramp. Is one of the biggest inspirations for what I did. And I think observing life and the middle class life here in India is the biggest source of inspiration for comedy. I just feel like it's one of those uncles who stay in your building society, who's always keeping an eye out on you and always trying to correct you, is the biggest source of humor for a lot of us.
And also,
sorry, Neil, go ahead.
Sorry, I also forgot to add Catch-22 and Leslie Nielsen and the Naked Gun series. Sorry.
I would just like to say to anyone who hasn't spoken up yet, I'm looking at you, Carlos and Anish. We would love to hear your final thoughts. Please speak now or hold your silence forever.
We struggle to say something clever now after all the smart people that have spoken before me. But I'm just gonna speak my mind and trying that it comes across as smart as I can. So I really enjoyed the show. I thought it was a really, really interesting perspective. What I think I really liked is this sort of, we mentioned it before, but I've called it in my mind the butterfly effect, which is like how very small changes in technology could have a massive impact in other things. I'm thinking of the case of the helpers that we were discussing before. Like just something this simple, something like, you know, we could make a sort of like an improved version of a Roomba or a garbage collector could have a massive impact in the economy. When I think of these things, I always think of sort of 16th century Europe, where sort of the influx of gold from America actually caused massive changes in the economy that weren't understood until 400 years later. So I'm also wondering to what extent the show could explore things like, you know, what are the actual impacts that we're going to see in our day-to-day life, which are not as trendy or as cool as we see in sort of all the sci-fi movies or in startup pitches, but actually they're going to impact us a lot more because it's how we're going to live and it's the way that we're going to live not very far from now, actually. But that's, I mean, it's honestly only my opinion and only a passing thought. I'm just glad to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carlos. Matthias, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes. So I really watched this out of I just wanted to enjoy the show, and I immediately got the association of, hey, this is Indian Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that was like my instant association, and that's kind of how I watched it, and I enjoyed it so much. And then, you know, just 5 minutes ago, you said that that's kind of where you started off. You know, you watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy at some point, and now you made this. And then I was like, it's real. That's actually the inspiration. So yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I must say, amazing work. And you know, tomorrow I can watch some more.
Absolutely.
Please do. The entire show is now streaming on Hotstar UK as well.
If you don't mind me interrupting you, because I think Matthias got off the hook really easy, and I can't let him do that. Matthias, you are building tools. There are very few tool makers here. I mean, Keon is working at Google, but she's collaborating. But you are, Matthias, building tools. So you have gone to the dark side called industry out of university. I have too, but I'm just going to blame it on you. But you're actually building tools that is trying to organize human conversation and human interaction. So I mean, do you see what like, do you see like the artists are trying to present and portray the future of AI? I know India is a very different culture from where you are starting off, which is in Germany and Switzerland, but still, I mean, do you see inspiration from this? Do you see any like any convergence? Do you see any ideation, like as in, do your thought process kind of match up with what these guys are looking at in the show? I'm pretending as if I'm speaking for the show makers, but I'm just asking you as a, you know, like a question.
I'm not sure if I understand the question 100%, but I can maybe, yeah. So we're building a platform for great conversations, or it's a platform where you can discover conversations, and maybe one idea that might be sparked out of this is to build more conversational bots that can join conversations and be smart in some way, and then do some interesting things to the conversation. Yeah, I don't know. I can't add more intelligent thoughts in this moment.
Well, I for one look forward to that. That sounds like it has a lot of potential, and that sounds quite exciting. Before we wrap up, I would like to just ask Pooja and Neil to share their final thoughts, and also just prompt them with a sly little question. Neil, do you think that GPT-3 might replace you soon? And Pooja, are you worried about AI like DALL-E?
I mean, I don't think, like, I think I can speak both for Neil and me. We both are very pro tech and pro science. So if AIs are like coming for our jobs, or if AIs are like, coming and doing everything, I don't think that there is fear there. I mean, both can coexist. If AIs and tech can take away a lot of drudgery from our lives, why should we ever work? Humans shouldn't be working at all, right? So if we can, if AIs end up doing that, then yes, it's great. If AIs end up doing what we do to other species, then of course it's awful. So I think it's like everyone is talking about it, that it's a crucial time right now, because of course we don't know what AI can sort of look like, and having sentient and conscious AIs, it's a debatable topic also. But the way, with just the increasing amount of data and increasing amount of AI, if we are sort of vigilant about it, I think, yeah, I mean, I shouldn't be answering this in front of all these guys. I mean, you guys can do a much, much better job. So I should just like wander off very awkwardly right now.
I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
thank you.
but honestly, guys, I'm really like thankful for this. Neil and I are very, very thankful for this. We've really like, we fancied ourselves to be you guys for a very long time. So we have really enjoyed having you guys here and seeing the episodes. And it's very, very reassuring for us to, see that a lot of things made you laugh, and a lot of things you guys thought were thought-provoking, because honestly, if it like is struck a nerve to you guys, then I mean a good nerve to you guys, then I think it's we can go home, we can sleep well, for sure. Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a joy and privilege to talk to you all, and hope to have many such conversations in the near future.
Yeah, and we shall, because now that we have access to you guys, thanks to you, we will be almost emailing you guys and asking you guys some questions. If our season 2 happens, if things happen, we would really pick your brains, because honestly, you guys are doing an excellent job. You guys are doing like such amazing work. We follow you guys in different aspects of the internet, so it's we really look forward to what all of you guys do.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't think Anders will mind if you were to reach out to him.
Definitely.
I'm always happy to show up in the strangest circumstances, dealing with the strangest questions. So I would be delighted to help you out.
That's really nice. Thank you so much.
I'll echo that entirely.
Well, this has been genuinely enlightening and just such a beautiful experience for all of us. I think I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out to be here and for sharing your incredible insights and being so generous with the knowledge and the wisdom that you have and the thoughts that you have so graciously shared with us. Hopefully this is, in fact, like Pooja said, the first of many screenings, and just the beginning to a much larger conversation that we can have with just the public at large. And we'll stay in touch. Thank you so much for being here. And please go watch the rest of the episodes. OK Computer is now live on Hotstar UK as well. And we really hope that you genuinely enjoy it. And can't wait to hear what you think. Do let us know.